Do you know if you are unknowingly sabotaging your success in software interviews? We all know exactly how competitive it is to get into these big tech companies. Google apparently has a 0.2% acceptance rate after you account for all the applications over a given year. And for every software engineer who's landed their dream job, there are countless others completely burnt out and have given up on their dreams after relentless interview prep. Let's dive into some software study habits that could be burning you out. Speaking of which, we should talk about horrible study choices. Take, for instance, my study method of choice from back in high school or college. I would slack off on studying for tests and then scramble to cram as much information into my brain as possible the night before the exam. And even worse, sometimes I'd just be frantically skimming through the notes 5 minutes before the exam, just hoping that some small piece of information would come up on the test. And you know what? I applied this exact same strategy to interviews for a while. Instead of properly preparing or studying, I would head to LeetCode, Glassdoor, Blind, all these other sources to try and find questions that companies were asking in their interviews. And then right before the interview, I would try to memorize as many of these questions as possible, just hoping that I would get one of them on the interview. But here's the thing. Not only is this method completely ineffective for interviews, I pretty much never got one of those questions on the actual assessment. It's a one-way ticket to burning yourself out if you're just studying questions, hoping that you'll get the exact same ones on the test. The reason being is that in the field of software engineering interviews, there are so many topics and questions that could potentially be asked. And this diverse range of topics means that the chances of you encountering one that you've already studied are slim to none. And worse yet, the biggest companies actually have entire teams and tools dedicated to blacklisting certain questions that have been asked too frequently on their interview, making your chances even worse that you'll see something that you encountered on Reddit or Blind or something else. So we understand why cramming and memorizing questions is burning us out, but what can we do about it? In a study done at the Cognition and Education Lab at Dartmouth, 2 sets of students were introduced to a challenging math concept. The first set of students were assigned 10 practice problems to do on the spot, while the second set were assigned 5 and then called back a week later to do 5 more problems. And after which, both groups were tested 1 week and then 4 weeks after the initial assessment. And what was found was that in the test 1 week later, there was no statistical significance to which group did better. But the test that came 4 weeks later, the group that practiced 5 questions 1 week apart did significantly better. This concept is called distributed practice or spaced repetition, where we break up practicing topics into smaller sessions over longer periods of time, which can significantly improve long-term retention. And in the case of software interviews, long-term retention is everything, because there's no way we can remember something that we studied like 8 weeks ago for an interview. We have to remember the concepts and be able to apply it when we were on the spot. So in the same vein of spacing out your learning, one thing that is guaranteed to cause you frustration and to burn you out is forgetting to review your mistakes. I distinctly remember getting questions in an actual interview that I had practiced, gotten wrong, and decided to move on. And those mistakes, knowing that I had a chance to pass those interviews, but I wasn't thorough enough in my studying, felt far, far worse to me than if I had just bombed the question that I had never seen before. Mostly because it's easy to get into your head and think about the what if. What if I had just reviewed a little bit more? What if I had just flipped open the right question before the interview? Could I have gotten that job? And in order to avoid situations like this, we have to review our mistakes. This is a concept of deliberate practice, where more practice doesn't always equal more success. The key lies in pushing our boundaries. The problem is that most people practice things that they are already good at and ignore putting effort into their weak points. And for me, I was very weak in linked list style questions when preparing for software interviews. But for some reason, I would just completely ignore them in studying because I found them very frustrating. And as a result, I failed many, many interviews involving linked lists because they're questions that are easy to ask and come up often. And to address this, I took a more proactive approach. In my study spreadsheet I created, I made sure to note down the questions that were causing me the most trouble, and I committed time to revisiting them. I would mark down the date, how long it took me for each question, and spend time going back and redoing the questions that I struggled with the most. And it helped me to see my progress in these questions. Practicing is great, but not pacing yourself is also the easiest way to burn yourself out. It's easy for some of us when we're overwhelmed by the amount of topics to study to try and just tackle it all at once. When I was at home trying to study for my first software job, I had days where I was extremely motivated and I wanted to do everything. And then I would have days where I didn't feel motivated and I would do literally nothing. We can't have ourselves be in this state of flux. We have to be consistent. And there's this concept thrown around sometimes that productivity has to be a laser-focused, unbroken cycle of work, or that taking breaks is the enemy and that genuine deep work requires hours and hours of uninterrupted time. But research, again, paints a different picture. Regular breaks have been shown to both enhance productivity and content retention. In a study done at the University of Illinois, 2 groups were given tasks over a 50-minute period. One group was told to maintain focus throughout the entire session, but the other group was given 2 small tasks to focus on that would come up randomly throughout the assignment. And they found that the group that had small tasks sprinkled throughout were able to maintain consistent focus and performance during the course of the test, which suggests that the brain loses its ability to perform at the highest capacity after long stretches without a break, which highlights the importance of rest. Which is why if we're sitting there doing side projects, doing leak code, applying to jobs, and not taking a break, we're going to be wasting our time, or worse, losing interest in doing this altogether. And on the topic of losing interest, these days, the huge amount of study materials online can really introduce analysis paralysis. With countless videos, books, websites, courses, it can be overwhelming to go through all of it. This is the concept of the paradox of choice, where more choices doesn't necessarily mean faster results. And in many cases, using a large amount of materials for your prep can actually result in slowing your growth. Take, for example, a quick search on YouTube for linked lists. You are instantly flooded with results, which can prompt you to ask yourself, which source am I supposed to use and which one is the best? Without a clear focus or a path forward, it's easy to burn ourselves out. And the recommendation here is to use specific resources. Stick to simple but vetted resources like elements of programming interviews in Python, cracking the coding interview. And after you've learned the basics, just do leak code and stick to a learning plan and schedule. Spreading yourself too thin and using too many resources can lead to circular learning and unproductive study patterns. And with that, another way we have unproductive study patterns is by not setting clear goals. A study done shows that you are 42% more likely to achieve your goals if you write them down, which highlights the importance of precise targets when we are on our studying journey. If we just study aimlessly until we feel like we're ready for interviews, we've just created a recipe for stagnation. It can make it feel like this whole process is a never-ending cycle. So what can we do about that? Well, creating a study plan and understanding milestones is a great first step. But make sure these goals are measurable and achievable. If you aim broadly and set your goal as getting a job at Google, you are just setting yourself up for failure and disappointment. But instead what you should do is create smaller achievable goals, like mastering linked lists and giving yourself a win condition, like being able to solve 80% of linked list questions tagged as medium on LeetCode. This is how you set milestones and feel like you're making small wins throughout your journey. But with milestones, you need to make sure again that you're pacing yourself. Think of this scenario, because I think we've all been here before. We pull up LeetCode for the first time. We think about the years we spent in a computer science degree. We think about how many nights we spent doing coding assignments. And we think, I got this. And you pick a hard LeetCode question and start doing it. I know I did this. And when I did this, I had the rude awakening that, wait, these questions are way more difficult than I expected. And so I dropped down a little. I tried medium questions, but again, they were still way too hard. And then I went all the way down to the easiest LeetCode questions and I still couldn't solve them. This was a humbling moment. And if you keep focusing on the problems you can't solve, if you keep banging your head against the wall with these questions, you will get burnt out very, very quickly. And surprisingly, there's actually a name for this called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is when people with limited competence in a topic overestimate their abilities. There's this hilarious chart that shows us that when we feel like we know a little bit about a topic, we feel like we are experts. But as soon as we learn a little bit more, we realize just how truly lost we are. Honestly, this isn't even a thing just for LeetCode. This extends to all of software engineering and web development, and this has kind of been the case for my whole career. Mastering fundamentals and recognizing when you're feeling overconfident is the key to not getting burnt out. But there's one more thing that will burn you out even more than anything else on this list, which is isolating yourself, which is what I did. When I was on my journey to find a job at a big tech company, I wanted to do it all myself. I wanted to learn by myself, prove that I could do it by myself, and get a job at a big tech company and pass these interviews all by myself. But in doing that, I gave myself sleepless nights of stress, anxiety, and pain. In psychology, there's something called the zone of proximal development, which represents the space between what a learner can and cannot do on their own. The idea here is that there are certain things that we have the capacity to learn, but only through collaboration with others. This is what isolating yourself can't help you with. If you are doing everything on your own, you will never be able to unlock this part of the chart. And even worse, the whole experience of studying and grinding just becomes a miserable experience that you have to fight through. And we don't want that. We want to make our life enjoyable. We don't want to maximize suffering now in the hope that later it will be all worth it. We want to enjoy the process and make friends along the way. The biggest benefit of not isolating yourself is that you can do mock interviews, which is probably the best return on investment for your time for software interviews. And to have someone to talk to about the pain and the struggles of the studying process. If you like this video, you might want to check out this other video that I made about how to survive an interview with a bad interviewer. Thanks for watching. Studying and learning new skills for software interviews can be a grind. But one of the things that helped me along the way is enjoying the process of learning new skills. And if you're passionate about a way you can do that easily, you might want to check out the sponsor of today's video, Brilliant. Brilliant is the best way to learn math, data science, and computer science interactively. And whatever your skill level, Brilliant customizes contents to fit your needs and lets you solve at your own pace. One of the newest courses they released has by far been my most favorite regarding how LLMs work, or large language models, which basically are the foundations behind the current AI revolution and tools like ChatGPT. I learned from this course that these tools aren't really magic, but they're based off large datasets, math, and probability. It's a very fun, quick, and easy way of learning new things. And for myself, I find it difficult lately to squeeze in large amount of times for learning these days. So Brilliant has been a lifesaver in providing me easy snippets of knowledge for me to learn. Join the millions of people already learning on Brilliant with a special offer just for listeners. Head to the link at brilliant.org/KC to get started with Brilliant interactive lessons. There is a 30-day free trial included with the link. And the first 200 listeners will also get 20% off an annual membership. And as always, thanks for watching.